Welcome back. We are in Genesis chapter 19 today. Genesis chapter 19 really centers upon the judgment that God brings upon the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and a few others. And so that's what we're going to be studying in this episode. Beginning in Genesis 19, starting in verse 1, it says, "Now the two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, 'Here now, my lords, please turn into your servant's house. Spend the night, wash your feet. Then you may rise early and go on your way.' And they said, 'No, we'll spend the night in the open square.' But he insisted strongly. So they turned into him and entered his house. Then he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate." One resource I came across said that no archaeological remains exist or can be identified to provide material for scientific investigation. The ruined cities of Sodom, Gomorrah, and others have vanished without leaving a trace. These were not tiny little villages, by the way. The fact that nothing has been found to this day is a testament to the complete destruction that God brought upon them. Now, when we think about our text, Lot is sitting in the gate. That means he was considered a prominent citizen of the city. The gate would have been similar to our courthouse, our town hall, our community center. Important people sat in the city. They sat in the gate and they conducted business. They gave advice. They held court. Things like that. So Lot sitting in the city, in the city's gate, he's a prominent citizen of the city. And just as Abraham showed hospitality to these strangers, Lot also offers to take care of them as well. Lot's response to their initial refusal demonstrates that his offer is not just lip service, but it also shows that Lot understood how dangerous this city could be for strangers. So Lot puts forth effort to show kindness to these strangers, while the men of the city were about to put forth effort to do evil to them. As the text continues on, it says, "Now before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both old and young, all the people from every quarter surrounded the house. And they called to Lot and said to him, 'Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them carnally.' If all the men of Sodom, young and old from every part of the city, surrounded the house of Lot with such evil desires, how could there be 10 righteous souls here?" Remember, per Abraham's request in the previous chapter. These two verses create immense doubt in our mind as readers that this city is going to face anything other than God's judgment. And the request of this mob is evil. They desire to abuse the strangers sexually and rape them. That's what they are saying to Lot. The men of Sodom are anything but hospitable to these strangers. Continuing back to our text. "And so Lot went out to them through the doorway. He shut the door behind him and said, 'Please, my brethren, do not do so wickedly. See now, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Please, let me bring them out to you, and you may do to them as you wish. Only do nothing to these men, since this is the reason they have come under the shadow of my roof.'" What Lot says here, I really don't have much of an explanation for what Lot does here. Clearly, it was not right of Lot to offer his 2 daughters to this crowd, knowing what they would have done to his daughters. However, Lot is also not a coward. He's not a cowardly man. He puts himself between an angry, lustful mob and his household. You know, what kind of guts, so to speak, does it take to stand between strangers you don't know and a raging mob? Lot is not a hypocrite who is comfortable in the midst of Sodom. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 7 through 8 refers to Lot as being righteous several times. And I guess kind of reading this, kind of what comes to my mind is, you know, it's hard to put people in nice, neat little boxes. Because what Lot does here, suppose he is trying to protect his guests but offering his daughters in return, that's not what's right either. So people don't always fit into these nice, neat little boxes that we would like them to fit into. Anyway, going back to the text, and they said, stand back. Then they said, this one came in, referring to Lot, this one came in to stay here, and he keeps acting as a judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them. So they pressed hard against the man Lot and came near to break down the door. But the men reached out their hands and pulled Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they became weary trying to find the door. The enraged, lust-filled mob has now shifted their attention to Lot, and they try to forcibly remove him from his own house. And it's at this moment the angels pull Lot back into the house, they shut the door, and they strike everyone at the doorway with blindness. The only other time, by the way, that this word for blindness appears is in 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 18, where in 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 18, this is when the Syrians have come down to Elisha, and Elijah prays to the Lord to strike the people with blindness. So both times in the Old Testament that this word for blindness appears, it is God striking people blind. The mob, though, is so lust-filled that the text says they wore themselves out trying to find the door. Even being struck blind, you would think that would get your attention and cause you to quit doing what you're doing. But these folks, they don't quit trying to find the door. They don't stop. Even being struck blind does not stop them from trying to do what they are trying to do to Lot and to these strangers. And so then the men say to Lot, have you anyone else here? Son-in-laws, your sons, your daughters, and whomever you have in the city, take them out of this place, for we will destroy this place, because the outcry against them has grown great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out and spoke to his son-in-law who had married his daughters and said, get up, get out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But to his sons-in-law he seemed to be joking. The angels then tell Lot the urgency of the situation. They had been sent to destroy this place out of the Lord's sight. And Lot is given an opportunity to take his family out of the town to save them. So Lot, of course, goes out and he tells his sons-in-law, who had married some of his other daughters, what was about to happen. But his family thinks that he's joking. It's a reminder of the scoffers of the final destruction and judgment that Peter talks about in 2 Peter chapter 3. Lot's warning them, judgment is coming, destruction is coming, but no one's taking it seriously. So back to the text, it says, when the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city. And while he lingered, the men took hold of his hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful to him. And they brought him out and set him outside the city. So it came to pass when they had brought them outside that he said, escape for your life. Do not look behind you, nor stay anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountains, lest you be destroyed. Now, some of the commentaries I've looked over have been rather harsh on Lot. Even here over Lot's delaying to the point of having to be dragged out of town. But I think Lot did what any righteous person would have done. Tried until the last moment to save his loved ones. Who would not have done what Lot was trying to do? Trying to convince his family to leave with him. It's what he's trying to do. It also, though, it shows how great the Lord's mercy is. God was not going to destroy the righteous with the wicked, because as the judge of all the earth, he would do right. Their deliverance, though, was also conditional on not looking back or staying in the plain. You got to get going and you got to get out of here to be saved from this destruction. And so then Lot says to them, please, no, my lords. Indeed, now your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have increased your mercy, which you have shown me by saving my life. But I cannot escape to the mountains lest some evil overtake me and I die. See now, this city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little one. Please let me escape there. Is it not a little one? and my soul shall live. And he said to him, See, I have favored you concerning this thing also, in that I will not overthrow this city for which you have spoken. Hurry, escape there, for I cannot do anything until you arrive there. Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. The Lord's mercy is again proven to be abundant. He allows Lot to go to a nearby city, which, based on what God says here, the Lord was going to destroy this city. So God does not overthrow a city at the request of one righteous individual, reminding us of what James wrote in James chapter 5, verse 16. How the effective, fervent prayer of the righteous avails much, or it does much good. The angels here are acting at the Lord's command, and they could not bring destruction until Lot was in the place of safety. The judgment of the Almighty was placed on hold by His mercy for one righteous man and those who were with him. The armies of heaven, awaiting the orders of the Almighty Judge of all the earth, stood poised to attack, and yet all was quiet. And why? Because they were waiting on the one righteous individual to get out of the way. Because the Judge of all the earth does right. He will not destroy the righteous with the wicked. So the text then, as we continue on, says, The sun had risen upon the earth when Lot entered Zoar. Then the Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. So he overthrew those cities, all the plain, all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground. But his wife looked back behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. So the destruction, just as God says, it does not come until Lot enters Zoar. Here's just basically kind of a brief timeline of these events. In the evening, after supper but before bedtime, all the men of Sodom surrounded Lot's house. Throughout the night, after the angels told Lot what was going to happen, throughout the night, Lot tries to persuade his family to leave. And at dawn, the angels take Lot outside the city and tell him to leave. Now, by the time the sun was risen over the earth, maybe somewhere around mid to late morning, the destruction rained down from God. And it talks about flaming fire. Fire and brimstone, it could be translated flaming fire and sulfur. So that's kind of a timeline of what happens here. Lot's wife, when it says she looked back, it could include looking back, but it may be more than just turning around and looking based on something that Jesus says in Luke chapter 17, verse 28 through verse 32. There Jesus says, Likewise, as it was also in the days of Lot, they ate, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they built. But on the day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Even so will it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. In that day, he who is on the housetop and his goods are in the house, let him not come down to take them away. And likewise, the one who is in the field, let him not turn back. Remember Lot's wife. Not turn back. It seems that looking back, it may not have necessarily been just a glance over the shoulder, but she may have gone so far as to go back into the city, or maybe at least head back toward the city. So perhaps it was just a glance over the shoulder, but it may have included something more than that. It may have been she was like, look, I'm not going with you. I'm turning around and I'm going back home. That very well may have been what happened. Now, the location of Sodom and Gomorrah, it is very likely that the location of Sodom and Gomorrah are somewhere around or under the Dead Sea today. There is an abundance of salt and no life in the Dead Sea. It's very likely that that is the location of where Sodom and Gomorrah would have been, somewhere around that sea. So, this is what happens to Lot. Now, Abraham re-enters the picture. Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord. Then he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the plain, and he saw, and behold, the smoke of the land, which went up like the smoke of a furnace. And it came to pass when God destroyed the cities of the plain that God remembered Abraham, and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had dwelt. So Abraham gets up early to return to the place where the mercy of the judge had been demonstrated back in Genesis 18. And as he looks towards Sodom and Gomorrah, all he saw was thick smoke billowing up from the plain where they used to be. You know, maybe some of you listening to this, do you imagine or do you remember the sinking feeling you had maybe watching the events of 9/11 unfold on your television? It was a horrible feeling, even for those who did not have family there. Now, imagine you had family there that day. There would be this immense concern for your loved ones and grief over the loss of human life. A feeling like that is something similar to what Abraham is feeling, concerned about Lot and his family. Did they make it out? But God remembers Abraham just as he remembered Noah in Genesis 8, verse 1. And this phrase, God remembered, it's a reminder of God's deliverance from judgment. God delivered Lot from the overthrow of the wicked. Now, Sodom and Gomorrah, their sin certainly included homosexuality and all kinds of sexual perversion, which was certainly one of the reasons for their destruction. But it was not the only reason for their destruction. If you look at Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 49 through verse 50, Ezekiel 16, 49 through 50 says something about the city of Sodom. It says, "Look, this was the iniquity of your sister Sodom. She and her daughter had pride, fullness of food, and abundance of idleness. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and needy, and they were haughty and committed abomination before me. Therefore I took them away as I saw fit." What does the text say here? They were prideful people, overflowing with an abundance of food, and they had plenty of time on their hands. So you have the picture that's painted here is idleness plus plenty equals extraordinary wealth. They were, because a lot of people like, okay, you've got wealth, but you work hard, you're busy. But they have so much and they're idle. This is an enormous amount of wealth that is in this city. But despite all of that, they did not help the poor and needy. Instead, they were haughty, they were arrogant, and they openly committed abominable sins like homosexuality and all kinds of sexual perversion before the Lord. So that was certainly homosexuality, sexual perversion. That was certainly part of the reason for their destruction. But that's not the only reason why they were destroyed, according to Ezekiel 16, verse 49 through 50. So now, we've read about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and other cities. Now, as the chapter closes, we return back to Lot and we find out where his descendants came from and what happened. Then Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountains, and his 2 daughters were with him, for he was afraid to dwell in Zoar. And he and his 2 daughters dwelt in a cave. Now the firstborn said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there is no man on the earth to come into us, as is the custom of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve the lineage of our father." So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. It happened on the next day that the firstborn said to the younger, "Indeed, I lay with my father last night. Let us make him drink wine tonight also, and you go in and lie with him, that we may preserve the lineage of our father." Then they made their father drink wine that night also. The younger arose and lay with him, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. Thus both the daughters of Lot were with child by their father. The firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. And the younger, she also bore a son and called his name Ben-Ammi. He is the father of the people of Ammon to this day. So, because Lot was afraid to live in Zoar, likely because that was also a sinful city, and what Lot had seen of God's judgment made him very afraid to stay in Zoar, He and his daughters go to live in a cave. Now, what Lot's daughters decide to do is certainly sinful, and they knew their father wouldn't have gone along with it because they make him drunk in order to do this. The children that are born are named Moab, which the name Moab means from my father, and the other is named Ben-Ammi, which means son of my family. Both of these boys, the descendants from them, they both became nations which had occasional violent contact with Israel. In Deuteronomy chapter 2, God prohibits Israel from attacking Moab and Ammon when they are preparing to take the land. In Deuteronomy chapter 23, both of these nations were rejected by God as his covenant people under the law of Moses. However, they did have hope extended to them when the Messiah came. Jeremiah chapter 48 and Jeremiah chapter 49 say, referring to the days of the gospel of Christ. A person from Moab could choose to serve God under the law of Moses. They just would not be seen as a full-fledged Jew. For example, Ruth, who is a Moabite, she served God, and she is in the seed line of Jesus, Matthew chapter 1, verse 5. And so, having thought about Genesis chapter 19, let's think about a few things from this chapter. Lot's wife turned back. Also, Lot's daughters were wicked in their thoughts and in what they did. Now think back to Genesis chapter 18. Remember how Abraham negotiated God down to 10 people, 10 righteous? God did not destroy one righteous individual with the wicked, the one being Lot. God would have gone all the way down to one person. And we learned this: never underestimate the value of just one. Because Lot was the only righteous person in that city, and because of that one righteous individual, God did not destroy the one righteous along with the wicked. Now, as we think about that, at the final judgment, God also will not destroy the righteous with the wicked. Not even one righteous person will be destroyed along with the wicked. For example, in Matthew chapter 25, verse 31 through 46, the Son of Man will divide one from another. The righteous will go away into eternal life, the wicked into everlasting punishment. Once again, Matthew 25, 31 through 46. In John 12, verse 42 through 50, Jesus said that the one who rejects him and does not receive his words will be judged by what they have rejected. In Acts 17, verse 30 through verse 31, Paul there preaching that sermon says that all people are commanded to repent because all will be judged by the one raised from the dead. And 2 Corinthians 5:10, he says everyone will appear before the judgment seat of Christ and will be judged individually. 2 Corinthians 5, verse 10. God demonstrates his commitment to justice throughout the Bible to demonstrate his qualification to sit as judge at the final judgment. And the point is this: you can trust that the judge of all the earth will do right in every single individual's case. And so, we have studied Genesis chapter 19 together, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, but also we have seen the mercy of God even in the midst of such great destruction. I appreciate you studying this chapter along with me. Lord willing, next week, we will get into Genesis chapter 20 together. But until then, hope you continue studying the Word of God, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.